This is the drawing that I'm going to show you how to construct using the basic shapes that we've learned for the past several weeks. You'll notice that there are cylinders primarily, and cones, and spheres. And this entire cartoon can be constructed using those basic shapes. Here's how we begin. Take a clean sheet of paper, and the first thing you're going to do is draw a large circle. Notice how much of the space of this page that I'm going to take up. Very lightly draw a circle here, then draw a smaller circle here. The first circle represents his head, which is very large relative to the rest of his body, at least initially. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect his backbone from behind his head to his hips. And I'm going to curve it like this because he's bent over. One thing I'd like you to notice, none of my pencils have erasers. Please don't erase anything on this drawing. I want to be able to see the way that it was constructed. Later on, we will transfer this drawing to another sheet of paper and ink it like this. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the shoulders. Draw the shoulders diagonally like this and put 2 points where it's going to connect to his arms. And then do the same thing for the legs. I'm going to put a point here and a point here. Initially, all we're concerned about is a stick figure that we're going to build from. Since the character is trying to lift this disc shape, we're going to draw the disc down in this corner. The simple way to do this type of disc, since it's also a wheel, is we're going to overlap 2 ovals and then just connect them lightly on the sides for now. Then I'm going to pull one of his arms down to his elbow here, and then from his elbow to his wrist here. Even though most of this arm's going to be covered up, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Try and keep this angle about the same. So this elbow, even though this one's further over here and behind, try and keep the angle the same. These little circles represent where the joints are. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the back leg. I'm going to make this one angled to here to his knee, and then back here to his ankle. And then again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to keep this line parallel to where his other knee goes. And in this case, I'm going to bring this one almost straight down. This leg will almost be entirely obscured by his arm. So that's the basic skeletal structure of this character. The next thing I'm going to do is draw in some large shoulders. And everything I do on one arm, I'm going to do on the other arm, even though, as I said, almost all of this arm is going to be obscured. For the bicep, I'm going to do an oval here and an oval here. And then because his arm is bulging, I'm going to make this cylinder also bulge. It almost looks like a soda can that's about ready to explode. For his forearm, I'm going to do a cone shape by starting with an oval here and doing another one down here by where his wrist is. Since it starts large and goes small, I'm not going to do a straight cone, but I'm going to do sort of an S-shaped cone. And again, I'm drawing very lightly. Same thing here. This one's actually more just curved from one side to the other. Even though the joint is here, I'm going to do his elbow out here to exaggerate it a bit. I'm not going to worry about drawing in everything over here. I just want to plot it because, again, everything is behind his head. It's also a little bit smaller because it's farther away. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do an oval where his hip is and another one where his knee is, or just behind where the knee joint is. Just like this shape here, it's heavier in the back, it's sort of an S shape, and then it curves in like this on the underside. The top part is very much like this side, so this is almost a straight curve from here to here. For his calf, I'm going to do another oval here and a smaller one down here by his ankle. In this shape again, slight S curve here and more straight on the front, even though it's still curved. Just like the elbow, I'm going to do his kneecap here. Then for his foot, I'm going to draw his heel as a circle. I'm going to do an oval on the front of his foot and a smaller oval where his toes are going to go. And this one's almost a straight line from here to here and from here to here. From here there's a little bit of curve inward, and then you can curve it around from the back of his leg to his heel. I like to do very cartoony looking toes. So I'm going to do a big toe as an oval here. Another toe there, another toe there, and another one pointing out this way. For the hands are essentially elongated squares rounded off at the edges. So I'm actually going to do an oval here and just connect it like this. The fingers, we're only doing 3 fingers on each hand and 3 toes on each foot, plus the big toe. His thumb's going to come off here. So I'm just going to do really basic shapes for the fingers. Since he's trying to grip this rock, I'm just going to do a square or an oval, or a cylinder shape here, and then curve it down underneath. And each one of these overlaps just slightly. Same thing on this side. Just going to do another oval here, connect it here. His thumb is on the side, and his fingers are here on this side, gripping that part of the disc. I'm making these very simple at this point. I'm not really concerned about doing tiny cylinders, but you can do tiny cylinders for the fingers if you like. The next thing I'm going to do to show where his clothing goes, we're not going to draw his entire leg because his clothing covers it up here. And we're going to leave the face alone for now because that's a whole nother lesson. But just initially, I'm going to start drawing some curved triangles to represent his tattered clothing. And it's going to go right across his thigh to his backside, and then back up over the top like this. There's where his backside is, where he's bending over. I'm just going to come up to where his back is curved here, and then over to his other shoulder. Remember not to erase these lines. If I had my way in this class, I would take all of the the erasers off of all of the pencils. So now you can see the basic structure of how it's built. It almost looks like a robot. I'm going to go ahead and start doing the face. If you think the face initially as a sphere, put two ovals overlapping like this, and these overlapping ovals help to define what the sphere looks like, but it also helps me to put his eyes are going to go across this one. His nose is going to be right where these two meet. I'm going to do a really tiny chin down here because my character has a small chin and a really large underbite. The other thing I'm going to do, and it's kind of hard to see on here, but the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very heavy brow, and I'm bringing it way down into the middle of his head to exaggerate it. It almost looks like a tortoise shell at this point. So here's his brow. It comes down into his cheek, and then down into what's going to be his beard. For the eyes, one of the challenges that people have with eyes a lot of times is that sometimes the eyeball is in a different spot than the other one. The way to fix that is to draw the two eye entire spheres first, and then plot where the pupils go and the iris at the same time. Again, everything's done very lightly. For the nose, I'm going to start right here and just do an oval, almost like a Muppet nose. He's got a very large nose. From his brow, I'm going to bring it down into his nose and just bring it around like this and curve it around like that. So far, before doing his nose, everything has been done using construction lines. But now, as I'm fleshing out the features, I'm starting to draw a little bit darker and pushing down a little bit harder so that you can start seeing some of the features. I'm actually going to bring his brow down even a little bit more to make it look like he's frowning. So I'm going to change the shape of his brow and bring it right across the top of his pupils here. Keep this part the same over here because that's where his skull is. Then the next thing I'm going to do is draw his mouth, which is really exaggerated. He's got an exaggerated underbite. I'm going to bring it past the side of his face over here and down here like this. And again, he looks a lot like a Muppet at this point. I'm going to finish off the face and the rest of the body, and then in the next video I'm going to show you how to transfer it. The other thing that defines the shape of a character's eyes are his cheeks. So I'm going to put really large circles here and here, and those are where his cheeks are going. And again, his chin is way down here, but we're going to cover up most of his chin with his beard. So I'm going to start drawing a few more lines. I'm not going to do so much of his cheek here because I want his lower lip to really be exaggerated. I'm going to do this part of his cheek and then finish up his eye here. Same thing over here. His cheek is there. Finish up his eye here. And I'm just going to leave that part that's covered up by his nose alone and then do his pupils. For his eyebrows, I'm just going to do a series of triangles, curve them. And in this case, since I want him to be really caveman looking, I'm just going to do a series of lines initially and give him a unibrow, so he only really has the one brow. And then I'm going to start connecting these in a series of smaller triangular shaped eyebrows. I'm just connecting them, and then every so often reversing them and drawing a little bit heavier as I go down the brow from one side to the other, and finishing it up like that. I'm also going to go a little bit off the actual skull part just to exaggerate how thick his brow is. I'm going to draw this part of his brow here, and then on the underside, since he's concentrating, I'm just going to sort of try and match up these lines. He's going to have a really heavy brow. And I'm going to connect these like this and just do a series of lines like this. You'll notice that I'm drawing very heavy now. You can actually hear it as I'm pressing down really hard. Once I'm satisfied that his brow looks the way I'd like the finished brow to look, I'm going to go ahead and keep drawing a little bit darker. And notice how I'm overlapping these shapes as well. Just gives it that much more character. The next thing I'm going to do is add a beard. And again, it's just a series of curved triangles. We practiced all of these shapes when we were learning how to draw basic shapes several weeks ago. And so all we're doing is we're just going to curve these lines all the way around his face. And then on the top of his head, we're going to do the same thing. They're essentially just curved triangles. Kind of looks a little bit like Sonic the Hedgehog. And I really like this curved shape. It follows his beard and then it goes right into his tunic or his caveman outfit, whatever it's called. I'm going to put another oval here, which represents his ear. And then I'm going to put another smaller oval down here where his earlobe is. So that when I go here and start making his hair a little bit heavier, I can curve it around his ear. So I'm just going to connect his ear to his earlobe. Do this part of his ear and this part of his ear. And then I can start darkening in some of these other lines. Notice how I'm overlapping them slightly. And I'm going right over the top of his hand in this case, because I'm more concerned at this point with his beard and the expression on his face than I am with what his hands are going to look like. I'm going to stick out one more piece here, which goes in the opposite direction from the rest of his beard. And I'm going to do the same thing on his hair. I'm going to put one curved triangle there, and maybe one more here, just to make him look totally shaggy. Then I'm just going to go in and continue to darken in the lines. Just follow your existing lines and slightly overlap them as they go away from his front of his face to the back of his head. From where his brow comes here, I'm just going to do a few curved lines like this for the hair that's coming off of his brow onto the front of his face. And they're overlapping his eyebrow here. For this part of his mouth, I'm just going to do a little bit of a jagged line. Almost looks like the letter W. And that's all I'm going to do on his face for now, and his head. As I start putting in the rest of his features, over his shoulder here, I want to continue this pattern where his tunic is. So I'm going to do smaller, curved triangles. All the way around his arm down to here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start drawing in the muscle masses. So here's his shoulder, right behind his ear. Here's the back of his bicep, the front of his bicep. I'm going to come around his elbow here and overlap it slightly, both from his bicep and onto his forearm. Then I'm going to drag this around like this and go to his wrist. Again, if you notice, a lot of this is covered up by his beard. So here's where his bicep is, and here's where his forearm is, and I'm going to actually ignore this line when I do the inking and the transfer. And I'm just going to continue his arm down behind his beard. His thumb is completely obscured, so I'm just going to draw his fingers like this. Bring this one around. This is the palm of his hand, down to his finger, and down around the edge of this disc. These fingers, very simply, going to go like this, overlap them like this, and then have his thumb sticking out like this. You can still just barely see the edge of the wheel, or the disc in this case. So I'm going to bring this around, just follow his hand, maybe exaggerate it a little bit coming off of here so I can have more of it to deal with. Draw this part of the cylinder. And then curve it around here and curve it around here. So that's his entire front. Again, I'm not going to erase this, but I'm not going to also draw that on the final. For his leg, it's mostly hidden. His upper thigh is mostly hidden by his tunic. So I'm going to draw these jagged parts of his outfit. Again, I'm just pressing down a little bit harder, following my existing lines, and bringing this around here, up over his back, and to his other shoulder over here. Then I'm going to start right here, come down to his knee, overlap his knee like this, come straight from the front of his knee down to where his foot is. Then I'm going to cut into his shin. I'm going to leave this big toe for now because I want these toes to be in order. So I'm going to start with the smallest one and overlap them like this. You could draw in toenails just to give it more detail. When you add details to a drawing, it's called an embellishment. Then just draw his foot, curve it there to where his heel is. Bring it up to the back where his thigh is. This is his calf. And I'm going to overlap this slightly so that you can tell that his clothes are folded over his tunic. The one thing that I didn't draw in here was his other foot. This is the ankle. I'm going to draw just his heel, and then the front part here. And also I'm going to draw this in here just so that I can get the idea of where the foot goes. But just the same way as I followed this line around, I'm going to do the same thing here. So this goes to his heel, goes into his instep, and then around to his other foot. even though the position of this is not exactly the same, I'm going to follow his leg up and just make it appear as though his leg goes here. And then all of this area, which is all obscured, I'm going to shade in. So that's all of lesson 1 on how to draw this particular drawing. I'm going to show you in the next video how to transfer it to a clean piece of paper without erasing any of these lines.